Have you ever received a phone call from the other side? Now, this story comes out of Chicago, Illinois. There was a young man named Will. And one night, Will is sleeping and he has this strange nightmare. In the nightmare, his phone starts ringing. And when he looks at his phone, he sees a number that he doesn't recognize. So he answers the phone call. And it's like, hello, who is this? And he just hears static. And all of a sudden, this hand comes out of the phone and grabs him. And then he wakes up. Instantly, like the thing that popped in his head was this phone number because he could still remember it from his dream. So he writes it down on a notepad and just keeps it on the side of his bed. Well, one night he's got a friend over and he tells his friend about his dream and shows him the phone number. And he said, dude, let's call this number and see what happens. So he dials the number. It starts ringing. And all of a sudden someone picks up. But all he hears is static. And he can kind of make out a few voices that are sort of talking what sounds like in the background. And he says, hello, who is this? Who is this? Is anyone there? No one responds. So then he hangs up. And he doesn't think anything about this. Like maybe it was just some kind of, random person that he called and they accidentally picked up. A couple nights later, right? It's late at night. Will's hanging out in his room. His phone starts ringing. And he looks and it's that phone number that he called. So he picks it up and is like, hello, who is this? And once again, he hears the static and like a slight hint of people talking in the background. So he's like, okay, well, this is weird. Like, who is this? So he calls him back. And this time he just gets a busy signal. A day later, right, he gets another call. And then the next day he gets another call. And this number keeps on calling him. And then one night he gets the call. And he hears someone say, help. And so, he instantly thinks like, is someone in trouble? Like maybe someone's trapped or something and they need help. So he reaches out to the police department. The police department look up this phone number and they say this phone number is not associated with an active phone. It's been out of service for several years. The next night, right after Will goes to bed, he wakes up in the morning and he discovers like 10 missed calls from this number. But he also discovers that he's gotten a text message from this number. And when he looks at the text message, it's a picture of him sleeping. This is a res story I heard near Cherokee, North Carolina. There was this guy who said when he was younger and he lived with his parents that his dad would, at night, they had these pieces of plywood attached to hinges that they would close over the windows and they would padlock. And he always wondered why every night his dad would padlock the windows shut. Well, one day he decided to ask his father and he said, Father, why do you lock the windows at night? Like, what are you trying to keep out? And his dad just looks at him and says, you don't ask about that. We don't talk about it. Like, you ask anymore, you're going to be grounded. You're going to be in trouble. And he was like, surprised that his dad was so angry when he had asked that question. And so he always wondered in the back of his mind, like, what was he trying to keep out of the house? Well, one night he is in his bedroom and he's having trouble sleeping. And he looks over at his alarm clock and it's exactly 3:03 a.m. And he starts hearing, and he hears this whistling, like coming from outside of the house. And he keeps hearing it over and over again. So he gets up and he goes out into the living room and he goes, and his dad is out there kind of frantically moving back and forth, pacing around. And he goes, Dad, why are you like, what is that whistling? Like, why are you up? And what is that whistling sound? Like, are you making that? And he goes, no, no, stop talking about it. Look, you need to go back into your bedroom and go to sleep. It'll be all right. And he said his dad was just like terrified. And so he went back into his bedroom, and he said it went on for a little bit and then it stopped. And he said he started to realize, like, late at night, every time at 3:03 a.m., right, he would hear whistling, and it would sound like it was coming from outside the house. And his dad would be up, just sort of walking the hallways, walking the floors, like freaking out. So, he was always confused about what this sound was. So one day he goes over to the neighbor's house, and he goes, at night we hear this whistling sound, and it happens every night, at the same time. Like, do you know anything about it? Do you hear the whistling? And he said, the neighbor said, you need to go home right now. Like, and his neighbor wouldn't talk about it and was like creeped out, and like instantly like went inside his house. So he kept trying to get it out of people in town. Like, does anybody know about like this whistling sounds that happen at night? Like, do you know what that is? No one would talk about it. So one night he is like hanging out with his brother in his bedroom, and they decided they were going to kind of stay up late telling some scary stories. Well, at like 3:03 in the morning, they hear, and they hear the whistling. And he tells his brother, like, you hear that? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, every morning I hear that at like 3:03, and like Dad freaks out and stuff. And his brother's like, well, why don't you just like try and open one of the windows up and, see if you could get the key, unlock the padlock, and look out the window. And he's like, what? No, are you kidding? Like, Dad would freak out. Dad would freak out. And his brother's like, well, if you're not brave enough, I'll go do it. So he said his brother like snuck out into his parents' bedroom and got like his dad's keys and went over to one of the windows, unlocked it, and then moved the plywood away from the window. And when he looked out the window, he sort of just jumped back, and he turned around and had just this look of dread on his face. And he didn't talk, he didn't say anything. And so he kept asking his brother, like, what did you see? What did you see? And his brother wouldn't say anything. And his brother's like, I'm going to go to bed. And he said right as his brother started walking to the bedroom, all of a sudden at the door, he hears boom, 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 boom. Someone is knocking at the door. And he hears it again. Boom, 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 boom. This loud knocking. And he goes up to the door and gets really close. And all of a sudden, his dad comes running out and grabs him and says, do not open that door, son. And he's like, why? Who's out there? Like, who's outside? And he's like, we can't say anything about it. We don't talk about it. Like, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. And he said all night long, they heard the knocking on the door. So the next morning when he gets up, right, his brother is very, very ill. And it's like his brother just got worse and worse, and then eventually passed away. And he said he always attributed his brother what he had seen out of that window. Like, maybe that is what was the cause of what happened to him. And he said still to this day, his father will not talk about it, what was outside the house. There was this woman named Lisa. Now, Lisa said she grew up in the suburbs of Dallas, and she lived in this very old home. Now, she said one night she put her daughter down to bed and, went to bed herself. The next morning, she goes and she gets her daughter up, and her daughter says to her, thank you, Mommy. And she goes, thank you for what? And she goes, well, thank you for coming in the room last night and holding my hand. And she goes, what do you mean? I wasn't in your room. And she's like, yeah, you were holding my hand and your hands were really cold. And so like her mom was like, what is she talking about? Like maybe she had a dream. Another night, she said she was asleep in her bed and she wakes up to her husband. He's like standing over her with his face in her face. And she said like he looked just really, really creepy. And he was just kind of laughing and rocking back and forth. So she like turned over and was like, "Leave me alone, I'm trying to sleep." After about 20 minutes, she got up and she goes into the living room only to find her husband asleep on the couch. But she said the scariest thing that happened to her is one night she was putting away laundry and they had this spare bedroom that they never used. Well, one night she happens to see that the door is open and the lights turned on. And she said when she looked into the room over at the closet, which was cracked, she sees a person standing in the closet, except that person looks exactly like her. So she said shortly after this, they had moved out of the house, and a friend of hers actually bought the home. And she started this daycare. So one day she went to go and visit and drop off some stuff to the daycare. And as she comes inside, one of the girls goes, "Hey, you're back, you're back." And she goes, "What do you mean?" And she goes, "Well, I played with you a couple times in the bedroom in the back." And she's like, I've never been here until today. And she was like confused, and she realized like this girl had seen her, but it wasn't